Kia ora. Ngā mihi nui ki koutou ka bari kousaho ko te kārahi o te patea whaiwhakaro. So a very warm welcome to this seminar. It's the 19th in our series of 20 seminars for 2023. And today we're talking about a vital linchpin in a lot of things in New Zealand. It's crucial in terms of cost of living and affordability because electricity costs are now a significant part of household budgets. It's crucial for our transition to net zero. Obviously, the electricity system in New Zealand is somewhere around 85% renewable, but that 15% is really important. And so the transition to renewable needs 100% or very close to it of renewable energy. And thirdly is the issue of reliability. And we've seen the problems from extreme weather, from outages, flooding, etc., affecting our electricity system, and the effect of dry years on hydro storage, etc. So we've assembled a great panel to talk about not only what's happening now, but more importantly, what can be done to reform our electricity system and to bring different perspectives to bear. And so I'm thrilled to have assembled what I think is a great panel. And I'm going to introduce them one by one. So let me start with introducing Al Yates. Al is Director of Ecotricity. And I must declare a conflict of interest. I'm a customer. And Al's fresh from winning an award at the Sustainable Business Network's Awards. So Al, you must be feeling pretty good about all of that.
Thank you, Barry. Yes, it's been a very busy couple of months. We actually not wanting to blow any smoke anywhere, but we also won the Energy Retailer of the Year a couple of months ago as well. So just a little bit about Ecotricity. We've been going for 10 years. We just had our 10-year anniversary 2 weeks ago. We're the only 100% renewable and climate positive certified provider in New Zealand. So that means that we, under a very strict United Nations protocol, we certify wind, hydro and solar plant, be it rooftop solar or wind farms. We have to go to the detail of measuring how much concrete is in the ground for instance, a wind farm, or for a hydro dam, we've got to work out how much biomass is rotting at the bottom of a hydro dam. So, and then we've got to apportion that over the lifetime of the project. So, customer-wise, we've got about 30,000 customers. About 65% of our customer base, from a volume point of view, is with commercial and corporates, people like Chorus. We've got 2 banks on board, including BNZ, and we supply off Tesla and ChargeNet and a whole bunch of other customers around the country. And also, more importantly, is we've got solar customers throughout the country. So about 70% of our customers now have got solar on the rooftops, be it small commercial or residential, which is about 30 times the national penetration of New Zealand. So I set it up 10 years ago with brother Mark, and we had a partnership with Pioneer Energy, which now, and we effectively grew some of their generation that they had in the South Island and North Island. And now we're proud to have Genesis as a 70% shareholder in Ecotricity. So everyone on this call, in one way, shape, or another, is a shareholder in Ecotricity.
I can attest to enjoying my renewable and good service electricity. Let's bring in Margaret. Margaret Cooney is CEO of Octopus New Zealand. Octopus is probably better known internationally, particularly in the UK. Welcome, Margaret, and we'd love to hear what Octopus is doing in New Zealand, and particularly your work with the retail sector.
Thanks, Barry. I'm not sure if I'm on screen yet, but I'm Chief Operating Officer for Octopus Energy here in New Zealand. We have a small retail business of only about 7,000 at the moment. We'd love to go bigger, but there's a few challenges with the market. But I think very uniquely, where we are part of Octopus Energy UK, which has grown from an entrant in the UK to now the largest electricity retailer in the UK market. So that's pretty phenomenal. One of the things we're really focused on as a business is using technology to drive down the costs for consumers, deliver better customer service, and help utilize the demand side in the energy system, which is really important for enabling a smarter, kind of cleaner system. So that will help us balance and integrate more renewable energy into the system. So in New Zealand, one of the things we've been focused on as a team is trying to enable some of that demand side. We call it in electricity terms, flexibility. So we've done things like utilize the control within the smart meters to shift load from the peak times of day to the off-peak times of day. We can also integrate with your electric vehicle and optimize the charging around a combination of the in cost to consumer and some signals from the market. And that's a really important part of the equation for a cleaner energy system going forward.
Great. And maybe in the discussion we can talk a little bit more about some of those demand management measures. That would be great. And Alva Feldmeyer, as a declaration of interest, I was previously a board member of the organisation she heads, which is 350 Aotearoa, and 350 is a wonderful international movement that has spearheaded action on climate change. So very warm welcome, Alva. Can you talk to us about 350's work and particularly your work on energy?
Absolutely, kia ora, and thank you for the invitation to be part of this panel. I've been part of 350 for about 7 years now. I got involved at the end of high school, was part of a local group throughout university, and in the last few years have had the privilege of being able to work for 350 and kind of make it my main mahi. What we do is we are a grassroots climate justice movement. We are harnessing people power to direct it in strategic ways to stop fossil fuels and build 100% renewables. And Mindful Money and 350 have been collaborating on this effort for quite a number of years. 350 has previously really been involved in the divestment space, calling on local institutions to divest from fossil fuels. But in the last 2 years, we've been really focused on what does it look like if we want to build 100% renewable energy led by communities. And to be fully frank, a couple of years ago, I was one of the people that did not understand the electricity bill. I probably couldn't have told you who my electricity retailer was. And I just saw, the big builds coming in during winter, and in an effort to try and reduce them, I probably wrote some university essays from bed just to save on energy. And fast forward to where we are now is I'm really proud that 350 has kind of entered this space to raise awareness of kind of what is keeping us from achieving 100% renewable energy, but also become an advocate for community-led solutions of what they can look like, believing that we do have the power to produce our own power and that communities can be real leaders in that transition going forward.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Alva. Now let's all bring all three panelists on screen and excuse my image not being up. I'm having one or two connection problems. Hopefully you can hear me okay, but I'll not risk it in terms of having my image up there as well. So let's just go back over some of the issues we've briefly talked about. And Al, I want you to start off and talk us through a bit more about this transition to renewables. And as you said, you've got a high proportion of people with solar on their roofs. What are you seeing as some of the constraints around moving the system towards a far higher percentage of renewable energy?
I think there's a couple of things. There's the market in general definitely needs a few tweaks, and so I think Margaret and I are on the same page. That's going to happen over time, but I think the way that we view it as from an ecotricity point of view is we're actually doing stuff before regulation changes. And I think the target, it's interesting, the target of 100% renewable is really good, but actually what I think is going to come out, hopefully from a countrywide perspective, is we shouldn't be targeting 105, so 100%, we should be targeting 105 to 110 or even 125% renewable. And the reason why that is it's going to make electricity a lot cheaper. Once we get to full renewables, the price of electricity is going to come down. We're already starting to see that now with the drop in thermal generation. It's good for New Zealand. And I think as an industry, we need to think about electricity not as a utility, but as absolutely critical to every piece of the economy and people's living. So if we can get to 105, 110%, generators shouldn't be concerned about it, because it's just going to mean we're going to be pulling more industries into the economy. So we should have, for instance, ecotricity. We supply 3 of the biggest data centers in New Zealand. That's CDC and Microsoft. We should have 12 data centers in New Zealand. Do we need to have 1 TY smelter? We should have potentially 2 or 3, because New Zealand's in a very unique position with the hydro that we've got, that we should be leveraging that up. And currently, I think hydro, from memory, is about 62% of our current electricity generation. There's nothing stopping us getting that to, say, 30 or 40% by increasing it through a lot more wind, a lot more solar. And it's not just good for New Zealand emissions, it's great for global emissions as well. So if we can pull industries from other countries to New Zealand, I think that's a good thing. And obviously it's going to get cheaper for all Kiwis and businesses.
Great, thank you. Margaret, for you particularly have work going on at the demand side, as you said in your introduction. Can you talk us through more about what that involves and what the potential is?
Yeah, so I'm kind of echo that ambition that Al's talking about around how a clean energy system can really help us economically. But I think the other part of the equation is an affordable energy system as well. And for most of my career in the electricity sector, there's been an assumption that the demand side is static and it can't move. And the reality is that the demand side can move. We've got plenty of new technologies going into homes. Many of us have smart devices, Google Home, Alexa, the rest of it. And one of the things that we can do with all this smart tech is basically link it up to things that are happening in the market, so that we can shift that load around depending on what's happening on the generation side as well. So if prices are high, it makes no sense for us to have something like a hot water cylinder going that can wait till later in the day. And equally, if the price is low, it's a great time to charge that EV. And that level of dynamicism from the demand side is a really key part of making the transition more affordable, and delivering that lower cost system for everyone.
Thanks, Margaret, and we'll come back to some of those issues. But I wanted your comment, Alva, on the issue of affordability, because you and First Union did some work on the structure of the electricity industry in New Zealand and the impact on affordability, and particularly in an era of relatively high profits for the gentailers. Can you talk a little bit more about that research and what the findings were?
Yeah, absolutely. For us, a good campaign is built on a foundation of good research. So we were really fortunate to collaborate with First Union and the New Zealand Council of Trade Unions last year on the Generating Scarcity report. And for us, I guess our interest was in like trying to understand, I guess, why hasn't that investment in renewable energy occurred? And so one of the main findings that came out of that report was that since the partial privatization of the large energy companies, the gentailers, 8.7 billion in excess dividends have been distributed. So that's 3.7 billion more than these companies have been earning in profits. And our argument is, well, we weren't surprised by it, frankly, and that's because of, and I think Al mentioned that before, it's the issues that we are seeing in the wholesale market, where the companies are incentivized to keep fossil fuel generation on life support because it means a higher profit margin for them. So we think that actually one of the major obstacles to getting close and increasing our renewable capacity has been exactly that system. And so having that data has been really helpful. But out of that as well, understanding, I guess, the role that shareholders, but in particular the majority shareholder, the government, can play in that is if we're not addressing the systems within the wholesale market, we're not going to be able to achieve our goals. And I guess just this week, our new climate change minister, before heading to COP, said that the government is committed to the global call to tripling renewable energy capacity and doubling energy efficiency by 2030. Well, in that case, I say we really need them to take action now because we're fast running out of time. And from what I can tell at the moment, even though there are some great disruptors in the market, Ecotricity, one of them, who are doing their bit to bring renewable electricity and generation into the market, we're not seeing it at the scale that we need to. And that obviously results in high electricity prices for consumers who are bearing the brunt of it.
I can probably add some bit of hope in there if you'd like, Barry. What the good news is, so over the last sort of 5 to 7 years, there's roughly been about 50 megawatts of solar being installed in New Zealand. And this year, there's just been, I think it's going to be closer to 120 megawatts. Now, the vast majority of it is on rooftop residential customers like Solar Zero. They've got a very big program. We supply the vast majority of their customers, and they've got batteries attached to all of those as well. So it hits not just the generation side, but also the demand side from a network security and peak pricing point of view. But the target, and I think it will be achieved over the next couple of years, Genesis is investing 450 megawatts of solar over the next couple of years. So on average, for the next 10 years, we need to be installing as a country around about 500 megawatts of brand new renewable generation, be it wind or solar, most likely predominantly solar. So I think the good news is there is a massive wave, and we're working with around about a dozen independent solar farm developers, so not just relying on Genesis investing, I think it's $1.1 billion into a solar farm and batteries. But we've got a lot of solar farms that might range from 0.5 megawatt up to 80 megawatts that we're also supporting and effectively sleeving those dedicated solar farms into corporate customers, be it dairy plant or telcos or wherever. So I think there's a massive shift in gear that we've got in New Zealand to build new renewable plants. And it's also broadening the investment base, because right now, I think historically, gentailers have been holding the lever for one reason or another on investment. But now, be it rooftop or industrial or commercial, you're starting to see some really big entrants coming into the market. So the good news is it's not just about the emissions are going to drop substantially, reliability is going to get a lot better. The good news is the price of electricity is going to drop. And so there's a MDAG report that came out a couple of months ago, which is forecasting currently the spot price is around about $150 per megawatt hour, 15 cents per kilowatt hour, which is very high. The MDAG report is talking about 6.3 to 7.5 cents per kilowatt hour at a wholesale level at spot. Obviously, it's going to go up and down with the rate of hydro storage, but by 2035, it's going to drop substantially back to the sort of prices that we saw 3 or 4 years ago. So it's going to take some time to get there. We're already seeing prices dropping substantially in the 2025, 26, and 27 year. So Hope is on the horizon, and we're going as hard as we can, as I know that Margaret is as well. But the other thing, just to add to that, is that the demand side. We have 12,000 customers with batteries in our portfolio. Those customers are already helping with network demands pieces. We've got a Lincoln project in the Ryan network, which is effectively supporting holding off the investment of new wires, and that's all through solar battery solutions. So yeah, hope is on the way.
Just
I'm probably not as hopeful as Elle.
Yeah.
I think there's more fundamental issues. I mean, some of this is it's all encouraging signs, but I think we've seen over the past 5 years some real problems with the wholesale market, both in terms of the persistently high prices, but also just being able to access contracts. And that's going to be critical for any of those new independent generators to come into the market and survive. I think history shows us to date that hasn't been possible. The entrants that have entered the New Zealand market as developers have then become absorbed into an existing gentailer. And so I think we just need to be really conscious of the competition dynamics in play and how that will influence price, because it's a totally legitimate thing for a company to maximise their existing portfolio, but ultimately competition only works if there's a genuine threat of entry, and that's where I think there's some fundamental problems.
So, Margaret, there's a question in the chat from Simon Terry, and he asks whether we can take perhaps some optimism for the idea of microgrids feeding directly into Transpower and bypassing the power pool and what he refers to as gaming by the gentailers. Do you see the possibility of some reforms within the current market structure to allow entry for others, or do you think that a more fundamental reform such as the separation of generation from retail is going to be required?
Look, I think if you look at the MJAG work that Al referred to, there's been an acknowledgement that the market power problem is going to become more of an issue in the market, and you can't just leave that unattended. You need to look at some way of dealing to that. So there are some different options that have been floated, but it's not clear whether action will be taken. And I think with the change of government, we're eager to see what happens in this space, because I think they all have heard the cry from MUG as well as end consumers about the concern around prices and the impact that has on the New Zealand economy. Yeah,
good. And into all of this kind of mix is a fundamental change in technology, as Al's been referring to, with regard to household solar and greater use of lower cost batteries for storage. But Alva, your work on community-based solar, can you talk about how that might fit into a reformed electricity system? Because there's also some great examples overseas, aren't there?
Yeah, absolutely. I think community energy project, or in general, distributed renewable generation and storage is absolutely critical, and it has to be a part of that transition going on. I'm not against, increasing generation and having like large scale projects, but I think we also need to be really clear that this is not what is in the end benefiting consumers and households, because the vision that we have in the future is one where people are more connected to electricity again, a vision where people understand where it comes from and what times of the day to use it, but also that we see some of those economic benefits in the communities that have been locked out of it, whether it's the 110,000 households that are currently experiencing energy poverty, whether it's the communities in Taranaki who've been, who've had their land stolen for the fossil fuel industry and have been locked out of those economic prosperity largely. So how do we create justice within this system one for the workers, but also for the communities impacted and for those who are experiencing energy poverty right now. And I think that community energy needs to be part of that conversation. And it's one of the things that we have not seen MBIE, as they're drafting the energy strategy, currently consider much. So in our advocacy and efforts, we've been trying to uplift those stories, because we know that the real heroes who are delivering those community benefits, such as Energize Otaki, such as Our Energy, and the work that they're doing with various communities across the country, like those are the real leaders and heroes for me. It is not the big investors and big projects that ultimately most of that electricity is going to go to prop up the large industries. Like on a big systems level, I know that's important, but for us, it's about the justice for households and for people. And so, yeah, we've been doing a lot of advocacy around that. We brought out a documentary a couple of months ago. We can produce our own power to uplift and share those stories of what is possible. And it's not just about emissions reductions. It's about giving people dignity back and being part of the solution.
Yeah, I mean, it sort of links into the ability for neighborhoods to store energy efficiently and be able to create resilience at a decentralized level. Are you finding that there's a great deal of receptivity to this, Alva? You know, is it catching on?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I think I've been finding as we're touring around the country and showing our documentaries, there was not a single person who wasn't completely excited and said, why aren't we getting on with it? Why aren't we doing it? But I think the reality of talking to many of the community energy projects and some of the ones that have failed and never happened is it's really hard. And again, part of that is it's really hard to be a new player, to be a new market entrant. It's really hard to go through the complex consenting requirements. It's really hard as a small community to raise the funds in order to build a small scale solar farm. And I think that there is starting to be like glimmers of hope. There is efforts being done from Araake bringing out a guide on how to set up your project, to the previous government having allocated a fund to give some funding to get some of those projects started. And I know there's incredible work at the same time happening at MB to support those projects and for there to be more. But the reality that we don't have more of these projects at the moment, and at the same time have businesses like Solar Zero thriving, who at the end of the day do own the solar panels rather than people owning their own solar panels, is because we haven't quite addressed the systemic issues that are preventing people from being part of it. So I do think there is a lot of reform and opportunity for this government to address these issues, to ensure that by the next, in a few years' time, we see that number of community energy projects as well as household solar rise.
Cool. So we're coming. These are really short seminars, I'm afraid. So we're kind of drawing to kind of finish off. But can you talk about where you see some rapid change happening? Because I think we had a comment to say price drops by 2035 being forecast. Well, given the fact that the cost of generation has dropped significantly, is there a way to bring some of that forward? What are some of the ways that you see that we can kind of reach this kind of situation where benefiting from renewables, from lower prices, and from a greater system reliability?
I think I totally agree with what Alva was saying. Is it's not one or the other, not big or small or something in between. It's all of the above. And from a cost of living point of view, we have to do all of the above. So it's not just we have to support families that are in energy poverty. The good news is the solar panel prices, for instance, have dropped from something like 21 US cents or 23 US cents per watt panel down to 13 or 14 cents. The cost of the actual generation has dropped massively. Now there's still a massive cost to install that on someone's roof, but actually you can access that cheaper energy tomorrow. So you can pick up the phone and be it any solar provider throughout New Zealand, you can actually start saving as of tomorrow. There is a bit of a misperception out there that solar is not viable, and it is viable. It has been viable for the last 2 or 3 years. And be it whether you own the system or you don't own the system, it can be fixed tomorrow. And what we're seeing actually is it's not just at a residential level, but it's at a small to medium-sized business level as well. So what we're doing is we're supporting as many of our existing and new commercial customers to put solar on their rooftop tomorrow. And there are plenty of providers that are doing that now. And so the commercial solar uptake is increasing. While that's good for those businesses, it's actually good for the rest of New Zealand, because every time you put a panel on someone's roof or a panel on the paddock, so to speak, it's making it cheaper for the rest of New Zealand. So it's not just for that individual customer it's going to get better, it's good for the rest of New Zealand.
Yeah. How about you, Margaret? You got grounds for optimism that the changes can be made more quickly?
Look, I think Al's right about consumers can exercise choice now, and there are viable options, particularly if you are a household where you've got people at home during the day, then it's likely that solar really makes sense for you. I'm still not so optimistic about the market and the likely trajectory of prices and costs to consumers. I think we're seeing some pretty hefty increases in transmission and distribution charges that will flow through to the market over the next couple of years. So I think it's a challenging environment. But I think definitely on the consumer side, there's amazing stuff we can do through the combination of solar, battery, and smart technology within the home. We can really help consumers drive down their energy costs and to make it a much cleaner system.
There's probably I can probably add something else in there, Barry.
Yeah.
Just very quickly, that the future of EVs is massive. And not just from a transport point of view, but from an energy storage point of view. So the cost per kilowatt hour for transmission and distribution throughout New Zealand will actually drop. And the reason for that is when you have got a large volume of EVs charging up overnight, the infrastructure is already there. That there doesn't need to be, in most cases, there doesn't need to be an extra investment into that infrastructure. So the delivered cost per kilowatt hour with EVs on the market, and obviously with solar batteries as well, is actually going to drop for the consumer. So yes, the true cost in total will increase, but the cents per kilowatt hour, because EVs and transport going to be a big part of that, is going to drop as well. And the other flip side to that is
the key thing though there, Al, which is the making sure that charging happens off peak.
Absolutely.
Because if it doesn't happen off peak, it drives cost into the system. If it happens off peak, it lowers that average cost.
The other thing is, I mean, obviously there's big transmission and distribution costs coming through immediately. So some people may have to wait for those cost reductions, I think, Al, unfortunately. But the other thing is, as more people go off grid, we're going to be left with a transmission system and to some extent a distribution system that is having to serve fewer and fewer customers because increasingly people are.
I don't think that many people will go off grid completely. I think most people that are investing in solar systems are still grid tied, and that makes sense. So I don't think we'll get into that situation where we've got a reducing pool of people that are actually drawing from the grid. I think the profile of consumption is definitely going to change, but there'll still be that broad pool of participants.
I'd agree with that as well. And actually, just to finish on the EV side, people with EVs will be incentivized to stay on grid and actually provide services to the grid. So EVs are actually part of the solution for the peak demand. So you've probably seen the release of the Cybertruck that can put 11 kilowatts back onto the grid. The average household, I think, is set to a maximum of 12, but in reality it's about 7 kilowatts. So that means that EVs in the near future will actually be part of the peak solution as well.
Yeah, good. So, Alva, your new report is coming out soon, I gather, to follow up on the previous. Do you want to sort of give us any heads up on some updated information?
I'm not going to leak that, but I can get you excited that next week, Tuesday, we will have some updated numbers on the excess dividend distribution, but also a new analysis on, for every dollar that has gone to shareholders, how much has been invested in new generation and in new investment. So I think that's going to be a really interesting indicator. But we've also updated some of our recommendations that have come out of that report, and I think that might be answering Simon's question in the chat, I guess, around how you can successfully discipline the behavior of the gentailers who have been benefiting of that system. And I think the key for that is the government's role, being a majority shareholder. So we had 5 recommendations, which we're bringing out again. One is setting a minimum profit reinvestment target. That can be done by the government, but it can be done by any shareholders, by anyone who wants to be an active shareholder and kind of be part of pushing those companies to do more. It can also look like getting the government to use any future dividends that they will receive to invest it back into buying back shares of the gentailers that will then be used for a special purpose vehicle with the objective of creating a stable and secure energy supply. It can look like ring fencing the existing fossil fuel generation, so that's not being used to kind of hike up prices and profit margins, but it's actually there to make sure that we have enough electricity as we're building new generation until we get to a more stable place. It can look like the government investing more into community generation, which is again kind of addressing that energy poverty and kind of a community empowerment aspect. But it can also look like having a windfall profit tax for any of the excess dividends that remain, to make sure that that is being reinvested back by the government into the solutions that we need.
Yes, and some of those are fairly ambitious asks from the current government, perhaps. Are you optimistic at the announcement this week from Genesis that they are finally going to end coal-fired power production in Huntly? Is that something that you regard as a positive step in this energy mix?
I mean, yeah, absolutely. Our long-term goal is getting off coal, but it's also getting off all fossil fuels. And I think we need to understand that announcement in the context of the new government's promise to reverse the offshore oil and gas ban as well, and potentially locking us into decades of, fossil gas being used for electricity generation. So I think that's a really important compromise, and I think you can fight over whether coal or gas is worse. I think there is, they're both bad, and ultimately we need to transition away from both of them. I hope that they are staying committed and building as much new generation as they can. But I think as long as we don't have an end to all fossil fuel energy generation, we're going to continue as our campaign.
Cool. Any final comments? We're running out of time, so perhaps you first, Al. Any last thoughts you want to leave the audience with?
Yeah, I think, again, agree with Margaret and Alva's comments. The market needs to get better. I guess the good news is, as you said, Genesis are reinvesting into new generation. Big box that's been ticked there. I think the other thing is that the horse is bolted for the consumer. So the corporate and the residential consumers have already made a decision. They don't want petrol gas cars going forward. They don't want coal or gas in the electricity system. And so that's actually, regardless of what the government does, we're already, we're heading towards the end point, which is no more coal, no more gas. You might need to use it once every 4 or 5 years, but it might be 1% of your generation. But even then, that should be, a thing of the past once we get to 105 or 110% renewable generation.
Cool. Margaret?
I think after the new government start, it's been really encouraging to see their commitment to increasing renewable investment significantly, and then also the energy efficiency piece, because too many New Zealand homes are low standard. We've got really poor energy efficiency, and one of the best things we could do to improve the state of households, both from a cost of electricity to a well-being and ultimately impact on the health system, is improve energy efficiency. And so I think I just encourage everyone to exercise their own choices there and invest in things like efficient heat pumps, which most of us have, double glazing, all of those energy efficiency improvements are definitely worth your while.
And hopefully we'll see a continuation of government support that we've had in the past for home insulation. That is a really important piece of that puzzle. Alva, any final thoughts?
Yeah, I think we're at a really exciting point in time where either we continue to the existing olden system and we just replace everything to renewable energy and keep it as going, or together we can make a really exciting pivot and build a new energy system, one that is actually serving communities and people and the climate, where all of us can be part of that solution, whether that's looking who your power supplier is and switching to one of those smaller retailers who are disrupting the system, whether it's getting your community together and starting a community energy project, or maybe joining a climate and energy advocacy organization like 350 and using kind of your voice and your power to be a change agent and pushing our government and our leaders to make those changes and remove the existing barriers. So I think overall I am feeling really hopeful about the opportunities that lie ahead of us, and that New Zealanders do care about these issues and will be part of that solution.
Yes, and to that list of what people can do, I'd add they can use their investment through their KiwiSaver, through their funds, in order to get out of fossil fuel companies, because we are facing an era where there will be a peak and decline in oil and gas production. And we already saw during the COVID crisis what happened to oil prices. At that time, they actually went negative. And the profitability of those companies, of course, collapsed. So the issue that many people may have heard about stranded assets in the oil and gas industry is even worse now than it was previously, as the major oil companies have doubled down on their core business and expanded their exploration and production rather than transitioning to renewable energy. So there's a lot that people can do through their investment funds as well to complement this good advice from our panel. We should all please give a virtual round of applause to the panel for a great discussion. Thanks to Al Yates and Margaret Cooney and Alva Feldmeyer. That was really good. Thank you very much, guys. And for the audience, we're going to be back next Tuesday, and it's our final one of Mindful Money's series, and it's on COP28 and the future of climate international negotiations and agreements. So you've probably been reading a lot of stuff happening at COP28. We've got Rod Oram, who's going to join us fresh from the negotiations. He's going to be joined by Joe Kelly, who's the CEO of Centre for Sustainable Finance. Should be a really good session. So please clock in at 3:30 on Tuesday the 12th. So I want to conclude with big thanks to the sponsors for this series. My colleague's going to put up a slide to show that, hopefully, or thank you, Olive. That's great. So thanks to Alphinity, to Medical Assurance Society, now known as MAS, Mercer, and New Zealand Green Investment Finance. Also to Chapman Tripp, Booster, Harbour, and Trustees Executors, and Pathfinder and Pi Funds. Thanks to all of those, and thanks to you all for joining us, whether you're live or online or even on podcast. So check in next seminar, and thanks again for joining us. Ngā mihi nui, mā te wā.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.